All right, let's just get right into it. When you think of the East India Company, you probably picture old ships and trade routes. But I want you to forget the history textbook version for a minute. Today we're going to look at this thing for what it really was. The most powerful, and let's be honest, the most ruthless corporation the world has ever seen. This is a corporate case study, an autopsy of a company that literally conquered a continent.
Just to give you a sense of scale, at its absolute height, this one company, a single company, controlled half of all world trade. Yeah, that's a 50%. It was a corporate giant on a level that makes today's tech behemoths look, well, kinda small. The question is, how on earth did they do it?
Well, this was their motto. Think about that. Forget your modern corporate mission statements about making the world a better place. Theirs was, right from the start, a flat-out declaration of power. It was this incredible mix of commercial greed backed by the full weight of a nation-state.
Okay, so let's get into the origin story. Every massive company has a beginning, right? So let's look at the East India Company's Series A, if you will. What was their startup pitch? Who funded it? And what was the initial game plan? So here it is, the seed funding. You've got a group of merchants and investors who throw in just over £30,000. Now, that may not sound like a lot, but in today's money, you're looking at an initial investment of about £4 million. Not a bad little war chest for a startup aiming to completely take over the global spice trade.
And this is what made it all possible. The Royal Charter wasn't just a business permit, it was a license to print money. It handed them a total monopoly. But here's the kicker, it also gave them the right to wage war. Can you imagine? From day one, the line between a corporation and a private army wasn't just blurred, it was practically erased. But like so many startups, their first big idea, to get into the Spice Islands, it was a total bust. They got completely outplayed by their Dutch rivals. This forced them into a strategic pivot, a move that would end up changing not just their fortunes, but the entire world. So here you see the classic business pivot. The spice market? Super competitive, dominated by the Dutch, low margins. So what did they do? They found their blue ocean, and that was Indian textiles. It turns out Europe was absolutely crazy for cheap, vibrant Indian cottons and fabrics. The company realized pretty quickly that this was the real moneymaker. So how did they cash in on this pivot? How did the numbers change when you go from just trading goods to actually running an empire? This is where it gets really interesting. Let's open the books.
And you can see the business model just completely flip. They stopped being just traders and they became rulers. Look at this, almost 60% of their income eventually came from what they called land revenue. That's a very polite way of saying taxes. Taxes they squeezed out of Indian farmers. Suddenly, trade was just a sideshow. The main business was tax collection.
And the moment the company got the legal right to collect those taxes in the province of Bengal, their revenues didn't just climb, they went vertical. I mean, look at that jump. From £1.5 million to over 36 million. This is the kind of hockey stick growth that venture capitalists dream about. Only this wasn't built on a cool new app. It was funded by straight-up conquest.
When you look at the raw numbers from their own ledgers, it's just staggering. You can see the millions pouring in, year after year, from land, from customs duties, from their monopoly on salt. And, oh yeah, the opium trade. Let's not forget that. A massive state-sponsored drug operation they used to crack open the Chinese market to buy tea.
And this right here, this is like a photo from the album. It's a real page from their books. The level of detail is just incredible. Every single charge, every bit of revenue, all perfectly accounted for. This shows you it wasn't just a chaotic smash and grab. No, it was a finely tuned, meticulously managed, and deeply exploitative business. But here's the wild part. You'd think with all this money pouring in, they'd be swimming in cash, right? Well, not exactly. Despite these absolutely insane revenues, the company was a financial wreck. It was bleeding money, drowning in debt, and was constantly on the verge of total collapse. This balance sheet tells the real story. The cost of running a private army, the largest private army in the world, and fighting endless wars was just crippling. They were often completely insolvent. And in 1773, they became the world's first too-big-to-fail corporation, needing a massive government bailout from Britain just to stay afloat.
Of course, that bailout had a lot of strings attached. This timeline basically shows you a slow-motion hostile takeover by its own government. With every new law, the British Parliament grabbed more control, stripping away the company's power piece by piece, until finally, after the huge rebellion in 1857, the government just said that's it and nationalized the whole operation.
So, after 274 years, what's the final tally? What does the bottom line look like when we close the books on this corporate empire for good? This, to me, might be the most important chart of all. It's a tale of two lines. As the company systematically drained wealth out of India and sent it back to Britain, you see India's share of the world economy just plummet. At the same time, Britain skyrockets. The Industrial Revolution in Britain was, in many ways, financed by the deindustrialization of India. And what was the total haul? Well, a conservative estimate puts the gross revenue pulled out of India at nearly £90 billion in today's money. And just remember, that's the conservative estimate. That doesn't even begin to cover all the unrecorded looting and plunder. So in the end, its legacy is this incredible, stark contrast. On one hand, it was a pioneer. It created global trade networks and the whole idea of the joint stock company. On the other hand, it ran a private army bigger than most nations, orchestrated one of the largest transfers of wealth in human history, and left behind a legacy of pure exploitation.
And that really leaves us with one final big question. The story of the East India Company was never just about tea or textiles. It forces us, even today, to ask, where does the power of a corporation end and the power of a state begin?